Welcome to this week's real estate deal breakdown. I am Greg Helbeck, and thank you for listening or watching. If you are on Spotify or Apple or anywhere you're listening to a podcast and you get value from this, if you could do me a favor, share this podcast with somebody who you think would get value as well. And if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Greg Helbeck. I've been a full-time real estate investor now for 10 plus years. I've done over 400 properties in very difficult areas in the U.S., on the East Coast and the West Coast. So everything you're going to hear from me is real world practical knowledge from my own experience or from people that I've interviewed on this show. Half of the videos we do are actual deals like the one I'm going to talk about today that I actually bought and sold. So today, this is a part two. I did a part one a couple months ago, and it was a really long time ago because of the situation that happened with this house. This is a house flip that I just cleaned out and listed over in Kingston, New York on Flatbush Rd. So if you're not familiar with part one, check out that video. I believe I was actually inside of the property breaking down what we were going to do. That was going to be a rental, but then I realized the rehab was too big, so I wanted to just sell it as is. I closed on the house. I didn't even clean it out. I threw it on the MLS, and in this situation, I listed it for a 160 because I knew that was a really good price for the area, despite it being on a busy road and needing a ton of work. And the fact it was a two-bed house, and it was old. A lot of things going against it, but the location was money. So I put it on the market. We had like record saves on Zillow on multiple MLSs, which usually is a good sign. Ultimately, the best offer that we got was $10,000 above ask, and the buyer originally was going to get conventional financing. More on that later. So I decided to take that offer. We went into contract, and the situation here was that the property was a tweener. And when I say a tweener, I mean it was basically right in between not being able to get financing and being able to get financing because it was technically livable, but it was in horrible condition. Now, the tenant before I bought it absolutely banged it up real good. They stopped paying the rent. So when I listed it, I knew it was going to be a tweener, but I knew the price would ultimately make up for that. So we went into contract with these buyers. They put $70,000 down, which is a lot. And we went into escrow and everything started going smooth. And then ultimately their conventional lender was like, hey, this thing is not financeable. We cannot do a conventional loan on this. The seller, i.e. me, would either have to fix some items or you're going to have to get a different type of loan because this thing needs too much work. And what I should have done, now here's the spoiler alert, I should have just fixed the stuff that they needed, which was probably 5 to 10 grand worth of stuff. And I could have had the buyer pay me back at closing in the form of, just paying more for the property, which would have been no issue. But I wasn't thinking straight, and I said, no, I'm not fixing it. You need to get a different type of loan. And that was a mistake because ultimately they had to go out and get a 203K loan, which is basically a renovation loan from the government. And the amount of red tape and the amount of time that takes is not worth it, right? This thing, in theory, should have closed 2.5 months ago. So we've been sitting in contract, and the buyers had to get, multiple contractors and bids and this and that and underwriting, and it was just a total shitstorm. And I lost out on like at least 2.5 months worth of holding costs, which I had to pay because I own the property. And I should have just said, okay, buyer, if you need these specific items done, it's going to cost me $7,500, which is probably what it would have cost. And I just want you to pay me back at the closing because now you're going to be able to get the loan and it's going to be no issue. And I should have done that, but I wasn't thinking straight. And I was like, I'm not putting any money into this house. I'm just a greedy seller. And ultimately, that took 4 months to get done. Now they got clear to close. We're closing, I think, tomorrow, allegedly. I signed the deed, so the deed is on its way to the attorney's office right now. And here are the numbers on this thing. Assuming it closes, knock on wood. I bought the house for $105,000. I used private money. My friend from high school actually funded the deal. He funded 100% of the deal, which was awesome. I just came out of pocket for the closing costs. And when it's all said and done, I still need to get the closing statement, which I'll probably get today. Probably will make $34,000 to $36,000 of actual net profit on this thing after the lender gets paid off because we had a prepayment minimum interest on that, and we do that with all our private lenders. So despite that, still making a good profit. I bought it for $105, put $0 of work into it, minus the landscaping bill. I had to get it. It looked like a jungle there mid escrow because I forgot about it. So that was like a couple $100 just to cut the grass. But selling it for $170. Now my expenses, now this is where I want to break down the reality of investing in New York and Washington compared to some cheaper states. Is the closing costs on the purchase and on the sale in my markets are way higher than the rest of the country. So on the buy side, I had to pay the attorney fee. I had to pay the seller's attorney fee. I had to pay mortgage recording tax, which is 1% of the loan, which in this case was $1,050, I believe. I had to pay title, I had to prepay the taxes, I had a lot of closing costs on the front end. And then on the sales side, I had to pay the interest to the lender, which, is how they make their money. I had to pay for the realtor commission, which is 4.5% of the sales price. So, a lot of house flippers, they don't account that, they think they have their purchase price, their rehab, and their sale price. They forget about all the other things in between, which is transfer tax, mortgage recording tax, title fees, attorney fees twice, interest on the money they borrow, credits they got to give out. So when you're flipping houses, you got to really understand the soft costs. So like, for example, in Washington State, there's really high transfer tax. It's called excise tax, but it's the same thing. It's like a certain percentage of the sales price. In Delaware, it's 4%. So when you're flipping houses, the takeaway I'm trying to give you is that you need to understand your local jurisdiction and what the closing costs are going to be, right? And like, for example, New York, when you get a mortgage, whatever the mortgage is, even if it's $1 million, 1% of that mortgage is a fee. So if you borrow $1 million, $10,000 is mortgage recording tax. And a lot of people don't realize that, right? So you got to understand your closing costs on the buy and on the sell. And when you're buying a property and then selling it, you're going to escrow twice, right? You got attorneys twice. You got to have escrow fees twice. You got title twice. You got transfer tax twice, sometimes depending on if you're paying the seller's transfer tax on the beginning. So you got to understand that stuff. In this case, I'm not going to lie to you, it's still not a bad day when you can make 35 grand net profit without having to fix anything. So, as they say, you can't go broke making a profit. Would I do this deal again? Absolutely, I would. Purchase for 105, $0 worth of work, selling for 170. The lesson I would have done here, and the lesson you got to take away, is if you're trying to sell a property to a buyer and they have to get a 203K loan, understand it's going to take longer than you expect, and there's going to be a lot more red tape as the seller, and you're going to have to wait longer. So my advice to you would be, if the property is a tweener like this one, if they can get conventional, figure out what items you need to do to fix the property to make it financeable conventional, and then have the seller pay you back on the other side. That's going to be much better than trying to have them get a 203K loan with all the underwriting. So hopefully you got value from this. This was a good deal. And this was also, just mind you, I got this lead, I think 2.5 years ago, because it took a year to close it because the seller had to evict the tenant. And then I had to buy it and then sit in escrow for this buyer. So ultimately, still was profitable. New York has a very long cash conversion cycle. That's just the way it is. Location matters. This was in a good location. If you're in New York or you're in Washington or you're in Delaware, you have a house like this, you want to wholesale to me, I'm down to buy it if the numbers make sense. Or if you want to just JV wholesale, we can split the assignment fee. We've done that with people who've done 6-figure deals that way with other investors. As long as the numbers make sense, I don't care how much you make. Send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram @grego37, and I'll see you on the next REI deal breakdown.